Welcome to Magus in the Media. This is episode 3, and we are unlocking the Lost Keys of Freemasonry. It is a beautiful book that has helped change my life. I, at this moment in my life, have not gone through the initiations of the lodge itself, but as we learned in our episode 2, you don't have to be in a lodge to be on your Freemasonic journey, the journey of the Adept. This is something that has been a lifelong path, not only for myself, but many around me. I do believe it is many of us out there in the world are looking for something a little more, looking for a little more meaning in our lives. And I think that in this day and age of the postmodern era, meaning is exactly what we need. Cleared up. Yes, it did. Thank you. I agree. Thank God. We're talking about it before we get into chapter 3 here. Chapter 3 is called Entered Apprentice. An apprentice, the neophyte, the adept in training. We are all on our path as we are walking the lines here. We're trying to understand what is our place in this ocean of chaos, as Timothy Leary stated. We are trying to understand who we are and where we're going in this ocean of chaos. It's one of those things that there are many books, there are many teachers, and there are many ways. However, there is only like one true path, and that is the golden thread of this path. So as they say, there are many vehicles that you can take on that journey, but the idea is when you're on it. It is a path of unfolding truth, understanding your inner experience in this outer world, and that you can actually, you can grow, but in that growth, there's going to take a lot of time, and there's going to be a lot of fire that burns away a lot of things. That's the calcination in the alchemical process. We must burn away all that which is not suitable for us, right? And the Freemasons have been one of many different societies or schools or communities that have taken on these secret teachings. The Freemasonic Order is not the only one, right? Before them, the Rosicrucians, before them, the Knights Templar, before them, the Troubadours, before them, the Hermetics, right? Before them, the Platonics, and the list goes on and on, back to Pythagoras, back before Pythagoras. We have the Sumerian and Babylonian schools of magic, and then before them, we think that maybe we have the Atlantean mystery schools, but that's when it gets into the more woo-woo, unhistorical. We don't really know, so what we can do is we can stick with what we know, and what we know is laid out through ritual and initiation. There are secret symbols on this journey and on this path, and in those secret symbols, we can have an unfolding of your conscious mind in understanding these secret symbols. And how do they do that? Well, you do that in certain ways. We do that through many different journeys, and it can be done through just reading a book in the right state of mind, I think, at times when something just unfolds and it clicks. But the main point is then, can you take it into your everyday experience in your everyday life and find meaningful change in that? Because if you're just learning without doing, you are not using language in action. You're not actually showing the world that you know what you learned. And so here we are. The Lost Keys of Freemasonry by Manly P. Hall, Chapter 3, The Entered Apprentice. There are 3 grand steps in the unfoldment of the human soul before it completes the dwelling place of the spirit. These have been called respectively youth, manhood, and old age, or as the Mason would say, the entered apprentice, the fellow craft, and the master builder. All life passes through these 3 grand stages of human consciousness. They can be listed as the man on the outside looking in, the man going in, and the man inside. The path of human life is governed, as all things are, by the laws of analogy. And as at birth we start our pilgrimage through youth, manhood, and old age, so the spiritual consciousness of man in his cosmic path of unfoldment passes from unconsciousness to perfect consciousness in the grand lodge of the universe. Before the initiation of the Entered Apprentice degree can be properly understood and appreciated, certain requirements must be considered, not merely those of the physical world, but also those of the spiritual world. The Mason must realize that his true initiation is a spiritual one and not a physical ritual, and that his initiation into the living temple of the spiritual hierarchy regulating Freemasonry may not occur until years after he has even taken the physical degrees, or spiritually he may be a Grand Master before he becomes into the world. There are probably few instances in the history of Freemasonry where the spiritual ordination of the aspiring seeker took place at the same time as the physical initiation, because the true initiation depends upon the cultivation of certain soul qualities, an individual and personal matter which is left entirely to the volition of the mystic Mason, and which he must carry out in silence and alone. So that's kind of entering into the beginning of that chapter, is telling you exactly what I was kind of opening with in my prologue statements, are that we may be in a lodge and go through physical ritual and initiation, but those things that we learn in that physical ritual and initiation might not actually completely be integrated into our everyday experience. We may learn, as we see in a lot of our anime or superheroes, that you may be gifted with certain powers after a certain grade is attained or a certain power level is attained, but you may not know how to use them. And so in not knowing how to use them, you can have all the power in the world, and it not being fully integrated, you could have all the power in the world, but not in the right moment at the right time have it manifest. As in, it could be stuck. And the things that make me think about that actually are in a video I'm working on right now. If you're listening to it in the present or in the past, I have put up on my YouTube channel, is from the Wheel of Time. There's a character, her name is Nynaeve, and she, I think, best exemplifies this kind of entered apprentice, going through things, attaining a certain degree, yet still not even being able to manifest the true power within her. She cannot tap into the one power. She can't get the channeling when she just chooses to, like most neophytes or entered apprentices or, newly ordained Aes Sedai. She can only tap into that power last minute when things are on the line at certain moments, because not even in the moment when things are on the line does it always even manifest itself. But when she has truly lost control of her emotional, intellectual state, that's when she has healed people. Which then makes her character very hard to deal with, because she is one of the 5 maybe dragon reborns. We in that show know that Rand is the one who seems to be going through all of the true dragon reborn ideals like the Karkar and gaining the dragon tattoos. However, 4 of his friends also have the one power spark within them that allows them to have more power than most Aes Sedai. And so what that means is that she has gone through the pillars. She's gone through her initiation to actually be able to get the ring that the Aes Sedai wear, the snake eating its own tail with the jewel inside. But even though she has those 2 things, she's still yet in the show, it cannot do the things that she should be able to do with that kind of rank. So what I think is important is that the mystic Mason or the esoteric path of Masonry is something that is what we're truly talking about here. And it goes back into, we must truly understand where we're at in our life. And when we're going through these things, we have to have patience with ourselves and maybe try new things, and maybe when we're truly experiencing the world as such. The court of the tabernacle of the ancient Jews was divided into 3 parts: the outer court, the holy place, and the most holy of holies. These 3 divisions represent the 3 grand divisions of human consciousness. The degree of entered apprentice is acquired when the student signifies his intention to take the rough ashlar, which he cuts from the quarry and prepares for the truing of the fellow craft. In other words, the first degree is really one of preparation. It is a material step dealing with material things, for all spiritual life must be raised upon a material foundation. 7 is the number of the entered apprentice as it relates to the 7 liberal arts and sciences, and these are the powers with which the entered apprentice must labor before he is worthy to go on into the more elevated and advanced degrees. They are much mistaken believe that they can reach the spiritual planes of nature without first passing through and molding matter into the expression of spiritual power. For the first stage in the growth of a master mason is mastery of the concrete conditions of life, the developments of sense centers, which will later become channels for the expression of spiritual truths. All growth is a gradual procedure carried on in an orderly, masterly way, as exemplified by the opening and the closing of a lodge. The universe is divided into planes, and these planes are divided from each other by the rates of vibration which pass through them. As the spiritual consciousness progresses through the chains, the lower loose connection with it when it has raised itself above their level, until finally only the Grand Masters are capable of remaining in session, and unknown even to the Master Mason, it finally passes back again to the spiritual hierarchy from which it came. Action is the keynote of the Entered Apprentice Lodge. All growth is the result of exercise and the intensifying of vibratory rates. It is through exercise that the muscles of the human body are strengthened. It is through the 7 liberal arts and sciences that the human mind receives certain impulses, which in turn stimulate internal centers of consciousness. These centers of consciousness, through still greater development, will later give fuller expression to these inner powers. But the entered apprentice has for his first duty the awakening of these powers, and, like the youth of whom he is a symbol, his ideals and labors must be tied closely to concrete things. For him, both points of the compass are under the square. For him, the reasons which manifest through the heart and mind, 2 polarities of expression, are darkened and concealed beneath the square, which measures the block of bodies. He knows not the reason why his work is to follow the directions of those whose knowledge is greater than his own, but as the result of the application of energies, through action and reaction, he slowly builds and evolves the powers of discrimination and the strength of character which mark the fellow craft degree. In its saying, action is the keynote of the Entered Apprentice Lodge. All growth is the result of exercise and intensing vibratory rates. Again, that makes me think of in the magical schools, how important things like Raja Yoga are, or how important when you are learning your Taoist or Buddhist practices of Shaolin Kung Fu or your Taoist Tai Chi practices. What I mean by adding the Taoist and the Buddhist ideals is that even when you're becoming like a head monk in those, like the Shaolin Temple, you must first start at the beginning as just a neophyte, just a trainee, right? You must first prove to your elders that you can pass on into the higher grades to hold the higher degrees, right? And in the Kung Fu structural system, they mean, can you take on the higher forms? Things that are more difficult. And in doing those things that are more difficult, it will tune your body to a higher level, a higher vibratory frequency. So your physical body is being raised up and molded so you can be able to withstand the weight of knowledge, is how I kind of interpret that. And it is when you can hold up that weight of knowledge that then you can pass through into different paradigms and move yourself through higher degrees, more power, right? And as we're doing these things, in our anime or movies or superheroes, it's the same thing. They're moving up their structural systems to be able to take on more power, so their body moves into higher speeds. And when those things are happening, they get better and cooler powers, right? They get better moves. Demon Slayer, they have the ability to learn more breathing techniques. Those breathing techniques then allow them to take on more bad guys, higher level bad guys, until they reach the ultimate bad guy, so that they can make the land clear again, bring the greenery back to the land, bring life instead of the more death and despair and fear and ignorance that happens when evil or non-being is kind of taken over. I think those are important. So that's how we can see this in action, is that action is the keynote at the beginning. Because you don't, without action, we don't know if you have the capacity to be able to move through the next levels of things, right? It is obvious that the rough ashlar symbolizes the body. It also represents cosmic root substance, which is taken out of the quarry of the universe by the first expression of intelligence and molded by them into even finer and more perfect lines, until it finally becomes the perfect stone for the builder's temple. Another thought in Demon Slayer, for all you Demon Slayer fans and those who don't watch anime, you should. I'm not going to should you. You don't have to. But what's going on is that as they move forward on the adventure, the main characters learn more moves. And in learning more moves, the moves become harder. Their body and breath have to become more refined. And as they're working on their body, their breath, and uniting those two, they can then take on higher breathing forms, thus making, again, I'm going to say it again, taking on more challenges in life. So the demons that they're taking on in that show, we can say in our real life, are just our real life expressions of hardships and things out there that we have troubles with, chance occasions, and mind stuff, right? The chitta, as they would call it. Chitta is just irritations of the mind that enter in, and the higher forms we get, the more ability we have to break them down. So we're trying to mold the body into what is to become the perfect stone. How can emotion manifest save through form? How can mind manifest until the intricately evolved brain cells of matter have raised the organic quality to form the groundwork upon which other things may be based? All students of human nature realize that every expression of man depends upon organic quality, that in every living thing this differs, and that the fineness of the matter is the certain indication of growth, mental, physical, or spiritual. True to the doctrine of his craft, an entered apprentice must beautify his temple. He must build within himself by actions, by the powers of his hand and the tools of the craft, certain qualities which make possible his initiation into the higher degrees of the spiritual lodge. We know that the black cube is symbolized of the tomb. It also well known that the entered apprentice is incapable of rolling away the stone or transmuting it into greater or higher things. But it is his privilege to purify and glorify that stone and begin the great work of preparing it for the temple of his king. Few realize that since the universe is made up of individuals in various stages of development, responsibility is consequently individual. And everything which man wishes to gain, he must himself build and maintain. If he is to use his finer bodies for the purpose for which they were intended, he must treat them well, that they may be good and faithful servants in great work he is preparing for. Treat yourself well, right? Eat well, breathe well, work well, have good friends and good things around you. And that's kind of what they're saying. Just build yourself up. The quarries represent the limitless power of natural resources. They are symbolic of the practical, endless fields of human opportunity. They symbolize the cosmic substance from which man must gather the stones for his temple. At this stage in his growth, the entered apprentice is privileged to gather the stones, which he wishes to true during his progress through the lodge. For at this point, he symbolizes the youth who is choosing his life work. He represents the human ego who in the dawn of time gathered many blocks and cubes and broken stones from the great quarry. These rough and broken stones that as yet will not fit into anything are the partially evolved powers and senses with which he labors. In the first state, he must gather these materials, and those who have not gathered them can never true them. During the involuntary period of human consciousness, the entered apprentice in the Great Lodge was man who labored with these rough blocks, seeking the tools and the powers for which to true them. As he evolves down through the ages, he gains the tools and comically passes on to the degree of fellow craft, where he trues his ashlar in harmony with these plans upon the master's tracing board. This rough, uncut ashlar has 3 dimensions, representative of the 3 ruffians, who at this stage are destroyers of the 4th dimensional life concealed within the ugly, ill-shaped stone. The lost key of the entered apprentice is service. Why he may not ask when he does not know. His work is to do. His work is to do, to act, to express himself in some way, constructively if possible, but destructively rather than not at all. That's interesting, right? His work is to do, to act, to express himself in some way, constructively if possible, but destructively rather than not at all. Without action, he loses his great work. Without true tools which symbolize the body, he cannot act in an organized manner. Consequently, it is necessary to master the arts and sciences which place in his hands intelligent tools for the expression of energy. Beauty is the keynote to his ideal. With his concrete ideals, he must beautify all with which he comes into contact, so that the works of his hand may be acceptable in the eyes of the great architect of the universe. And to go back to the great seven liberal arts, I think that's really important, because of this is something that we're lacking in today's world, is that our schools have turned into degraded institutions of unlearnedness, even though we pay larger sums of value of our time and our money to go into these things, thinking that we're going to truly gain what they used to gain in the past from going into the academy, to going into the institution, to learn these seven true liberal arts that are going to help us on our path of being human. Because everything from there, when we lay that those groundworks of foundational work of understanding the physical universe, understanding the mental universe, and then the unconscious mind, that once those things can be done in that order, if we start from a very young age and we build up, we can build what they built as the Bene Gesserit in Dune. They built Paul Muad'Dib. He was learned most likely in these seven liberal arts, as well as had the ability to use his body in such a way, both because of his father was Duke Leto and also his mother was a Bene Gesserit who understood the weirding way, that he was able to then become the Kizwash Haderach, become the perfect stone, and become the Adam Kadmon, this alchemized king, right, or queen. So I think these things are really important for us to understand. There's also, interesting enough, I think, whatever you guys think out there, is that when he says his work is to do, to act, to express himself in some way constructively if possible, but destructively rather than not at all. Destructively rather than not at all. I think that's crazy, but also maybe they have a point, is that even if you're doing something bad is better than not doing it all. Because then in learning how that you're doing it bad, you can then do it better, maybe. Something to think about. His daily life in home, business, and society, together with the realization of his fundamental unity of each with all, form the base upon which aspiring candidate may raise a greater superstructure. In truth, he must live the life, the result of which is the purification of his body, so that the more attenuated forces of the higher degrees may express themselves through the finer sensitivities. If the receiving pole within himself, when he reaches this stage in his growth, he is spiritually worthy to consider advancement into the higher degrees. This advancement is not the result of election or ballot, but is an automatic process in which, having sensitized his consciousness by his life, he thereby attunes himself to the next succeeding plane of expression. All initiation is the result of adjustment of the evolving life to the physical, emotional, and mental planes of consciousness through which it passes. We must now consider the spiritual requirements of one who feels that he would mystically correlate himself with the great spiritual fraternity which, concealed behind the exoteric rite, forms the living power of the Entered Apprentice Lodge. It is essential that the Entered Apprentice should have studied sufficiently the subject of anatomy to have at least a general idea of the physical body, for the entire degree is based upon the mystery of form. The human body is the highest manifestation of form for which he is capable of analyzing. Consequently, he must devote himself to the study of his own being and its mysteries and complexities. Make sense? Mystery of form. A lost key is of service. It is but to act, and that we are trying to understand and mold the rough ashlar into the perfect stone. And so we move on. Number 2, the entered apprentice must realize that his body is the living temple of the living God and treat it accordingly. For when he abuses or mistreats it, he breaks the sacred obligation which he must assume before he can ever hope to understand the true mysteries of the craft. The breaking of his pact with the higher life evolving within himself unfailingly invokes the retributive agencies of nature. if we all walked around thinking that, I think we all would be a lot nicer to each other. For the kingdom of heaven is within, right? We all are trying to attain that Buddhahood. We all are trying to become the Kiswat Heteroch, even if we understand that there is something out there that is pushing us or moving us forward on our golden path that we don't truly understand, but we know is there. We have a feeling. And that we must treat our life accordingly, that we must treat our life as if we are the living temple of the living God, that we have a sacred obligation, and that in that sacred obligation, that comes with certain principles and virtues to live by. So, 3, he must study the problem of the maintenance of bodies through food, clothing, breathing, and other necessities. As of all of these things are important steps in the Entered Apprentice Lodge, those who eat immoderately, dress improperly, and use only about 1/3 of their lung capacity can never have the physical efficiency necessary for the fullest expression of the higher life. Says it right there, breath capacity. If we're only using 1/3 of our lung capacity, can we ever truly have the physical efficiency necessary for the fullest expression of the higher life? I don't know. Again, that goes back into Demon Slayer, is that in Demon Slayer, they have total concentration breathing, which is like pranayama in action, when you're learning to use all of your breath, holding it for as long as you can and letting it go. In ceremonial magic in the Golden Dawn, and in Crowley's AA, they teach you in the beginning how to do breath work and control. So you're learning the 8 limbs of yoga. Crowley got it from the Golden Dawn. So they're doing these 8 limbs of yoga. You're learning how to meditate. You're learning how to breathe properly. And in doing so, you're learning how to use the full capacity of your breath. And what would that do to us if we truly knew? So go back to Demon Slayer, is that total concentration breathing takes everyone's level to the next game, thus putting more, taking their beats per minute of their heart rate, raising it up to such a level that it allows all the oxygen to move throughout your body, thus you acting in a suprahuman way or a superhuman way. And then it takes it to that next step, that all the Hashira, all the pillars, all the highest levels of Demon Slayer core, what they do, the good guys, they use total concentration breathing constant. And that means they are at all times breathing consciously, taking themselves to such a level through that breath work that then they have the ability to gain a mark on their forehead or in their body somewhere that puts their level up to what the first sun breathing, the originator of the breath technique in Demon Slayer, the first Demon Slayer core. And so that what that does is that takes them up to the highest level of things to be able to take out that big bad guy. I believe that's also what you're doing when you're trying to activate the light body, the human light body, the Merkaba, the rainbow body, the diamond body, whatever that is, that you're attenuating your breath with body, with mind and soul so efficiently that they work in harmony with themselves. And I believe that's like how you become the immortal man, right? Kind of says it right here. At least if it doesn't say it, it's like alluding to it, I believe. He must grow physically and in the expression of concrete things. Human relationships must be idealized at the same time, and he must seek to unfold all unselfish qualities, which are necessary for the harmonious working of the Mason and his fellow men on the physical plane of nature. He must seek to round off all inequalities. He can best do this by balancing his mental and physical organism through the application and study of the 7 liberal arts and sciences. Yes, I agree. That does make sense then. Do something in some way to learn and grow. Yes, I agree, Kaiba. Even though it's hard, I think, even if you're doing it bad, it's like you feel it. And when you're doing something bad, it's hard to continue doing it. A lot of times people just give up and quit. And it's like, how can I get through those hard times and bad times? Well, it's just practice. Keep doing it. Move through it. And hopefully we learn from it so we can become more of the Jedi-ish character that's not controlled by the Senate, right? But like what happens in Revenge of the Sith, but like the character that's the true master of his domain, where instead of that, what happens if you keep doing things bad, you'll maybe then take shortcuts, and in shortcuts we seek something more than that, because those shortcut seekings end up wanting us to gain power. And when we try to gain power, that's when we don't move unselfishly, or like we're the living holy temple of God, because if I am that, so are you. And if so are you, then we all are in some way or the other, even if you're an unawakened godlike state, right? That living temple of God, at least. And so I think do it, and hopefully while you're doing it, you have a good ethical moral system, which in then doing it, you understand what it is you have as an ethical and moral system, so you can move through it and do it better. Until he is relatively master of these principles on the highest plane within his own being, he cannot hope spiritually to attract to himself, through quality of his own character, the life-giving ray of the fellow craft. When he reaches this point, however, he is spiritually ready to hope for membership in a more advanced degree. The Mason must realize that his innermost motives are the index of his real self, and those who allow social position, financial or business considerations, or selfish and materialistic ideals to lead them into the Masonic Brotherhood have thereby automatically separated themselves from the craft. They can never do any harm to Freemasonry by joining because they cannot get in. Well, that's interesting, especially since I think there have been a lot of bad people who have taken upon themselves the titles of being a Freemason. So, and then started little groups, which is then why I think we get all these conspiracy-minded individuals who are pushing through the social spheres trying to tell people that all Freemasonry is satanic and bad and like Luciferian, and these terms that mean it in a negative way, but they don't truly understand that. What I take from this is that those people who have done that are only a Freemason by lodge number, but not by actually being let into the mystical Mason college, the invisible college that's on that plane, the spiritual plane, the metaphysical plane, or the astral plane. So, the Mason must realize that his innermost motives are the index of his real self, and those who allow social positions, financial or business consideration, or selfish and materialistic ideals to lead them in the Masonic Brotherhood have thereby automatically separated themselves from the craft. They can never do any harm to Freemasonry by joining because they cannot get in. Ensconced within the lodge, they may feel that they have deceived the Grand Master of the universe. But when the spiritual lodge meets to carry on the true work of the craft, they are disqualified and absent. Watch fobs, lapel badges, and other insignia do not make Masons, neither do the ritual ordain them. Masons are evolved through self-conscious effort to live up to the highest ideals within themselves. Their lives are the sole insignia of their rank, greater by far than any visible, tangible credential. Bearing this in mind, it is possible for the unselfish, aspiring soul to become spiritually and liberally vouched for by the centers of consciousness as entered apprentice. It means he has taken the first grand step on the path of personal liberation. He is now symbolized as the child with the smiling face, for with the simplicity of a child, he places himself under the protection of his great spiritual father, willing and glad to obey each of his commands. Having reached this point and having done the best it was possible for him to do, he is in position to hope that the powers that be, moving in their mysterious manner, may find him worthy to undertake the second great step in spiritual liberation. So ends chapter 3. And so I think I find that very interesting, right? I find it very interesting for many reasons, is that what we're doing there is we're aligning our true values and our true temple. We are becoming the greatest version of ourself. We are at the beginning stages of the anime or the story or the film that we're watching of the superhero or the hero character. And in that, you must enter into your hero's journey and accept that journey. And then when you accept that journey, you will come up against certain dragons, certain experiences on the path, and they will test you. And in those tests, you will see what you're made of. And by doing that, it is after that initial test, you will come upon a master. That master then is giving you a choice to accept the journey ahead of you or to return back and don't do it at all. And I think that goes back into the idea of do it or do it badly, but just make sure you do it. right? So do it good or do it bad, but just make sure you do it, because it's in accepting the journey ahead of you that you can then carve out your moral and ethical structures, mold the rough ashlar into the perfect stone. So that's also molding the temple into the holy temple of God. And so in doing that, you'll understand, like in your anime or in your stories and mythologies, that you will gain weapons along the way. And those weapons and magical powers that you gain along the way are not the end in and of themselves, but just part of the journey. They're the tools and techniques that we'll use to be able to reach certain paradigm shifts, certain levels, right? And once it's like in any video game, once you reach the end of that level, you fight a bad guy. And did you learn how to use the tools and techniques that you gained in that time? And then you go up against it, and then you win or lose. If you lose, you go back a little bit and you go through it again, right? That's that karmic path. It's like you must learn the lesson until you must do the lesson until you learn it. And in learning it, you can move on for another lesson. And then you can bear heavier burdens, right? Take on more responsibility to bear heavier burdens, to be able to gain more tools. And in gaining more tools, you can take on more bad guys. And then by taking on more bad guys, you level up whatever those bad guys are and what are those levels that you need. Tools for the fool. I like that, because it's true. The fool is every character, right? The fool is all characters. He's every great major arcana. He's every great archetype, and he turns into the magus and the and everyone on that board until he becomes the universe, and then he becomes a fool again. But he's never the same fool as he was when he first started the journey. Tools for fools. That's a shirt idea. Put that on a shirt, Magus and the Mia, tools for fools. We must realize that if we can understand and take the things we learn from books like this, the symbols and the signs, that we can then, when watching these stories, put ourselves in the place of the characters. And if we're putting ourselves in the place of the characters, we can understand where we're at in our own journey. We can have that self-reflection in doing so and try to understand how and what tools do I still need on my journey? And in what I'm doing, can I see the benefit or pitfalls of myself? And like, what am I and where am I? How am I being the fool on my journey? Right. So chapter 4 is the fellow craft. And we're going to continue on to it in this fellow craft. Life manifests not only through action on the physical plane, but through human emotion and sentiment. This is the type of energy taken up by the student when he starts his labors in the fellow craft. From youth with its smiling face, he passes on to the greater responsibilities of manhood. On the second step of the temple stands a soldier dressed in shining armor, but his sword is sheathed and a book is in his hand. He is symbolic of strength, the energy of Mars, and the wonderful step in spiritual unfoldment with which we know as fellow craft. Through each of one of us course the fiery rays of human emotions, a great seething cauldron of power behind each expression of human energy. Like spirited horses chafing at the bit, like hounds eager for the chase, the emotional powers cannot be held in check, but break the walls of restraint and pour forth as fiery expressions of dynamic energy. This great principle of emotion we know as the second murderer of Hiram. Through the perversion of human emotion, there comes into the world untold sorrow, which through reaction manifests in the mental and physical bodies. It is strange how divine powers may become perverted until each expression and urge becomes a ruffian and a murderer. The divine compassion of the gods manifests in this world of form very differently than in the realm of light. Divine compassion is energized by the same influxes as moral passions and the lusts of earth. The spiritual light rays of cosmos, the fire princes of the dawn, with which seethe and surge through the unregenerated man, are the impulses which he perverts to murder and hate. The ceaseless power of chaos, the seething pinwheel of spirals of perpetual motion, whose majestic cadences are the music of the spheres, are energized by the same great power that man uses to destroy the highest and best. The same mystic power that keeps the planets in their orbits around the solar body. The same energy that keeps each electron spinning and whirling, the same energy that is building the temple of God, is now a merciless slave driver, which unmastered and uncurbed strikes the compassionate one and sends him reeling backward into the darkness of his prison. Man does not listen to that little voice which speaks to him in ever-loving, ever-sorrowful tones. This voice speaks of the peace accompanying the constructive application of energy, which he must chain if he would master the powers of creation. How long will it take King Hiram of Tyre, the warrior on the second step, symbolic of the fellow craft of the cosmic lodge, to teach mankind the lessons of self-mastery? The teacher can do it only as the daily depicts the miseries which are results of uncurbed appetites. The strength of man was not given to be used destructively, but that he might build a temple worthy to be the dwelling place of the great architect of the universe. God is glorifying himself through the individualized portions of himself, and is slowly teaching these individualized portions to understand and glorify the whole. The day has come when fellow craftsmen must know and apply their knowledge. The lost key to their grade is the mastery of emotion, which places the energy of the universe at their disposal. Man can only expect to be entrusted with great powers by proving his ability to use it constructively and selflessly. When the Mason learns that the key to the warrior on the block is the proper application of the dynamo of living power, he has learned the mystery of his craft. The seething energies of Lucifer are in his hand, and before he may step onward and upward, he must prove his ability to properly apply energy. He must follow in the footsteps of his forefather, Tubal-Cain, who with the mighty strength of the war god hammered his sword into a plowshare. Incessant vigilance over thought, action, and desire is indispensable to those who wish to make progress in the unfolding of their own being. And the fellow craft's degree is the degree of transmutation. The hand that slays must lift the fallen, while the lips given to cursing must be taught to pray. The heart that hates must learn the mystery of compassion, as the result of a deeper and more perfect understanding of man's relation to his brother. The firm, kind hand of spirit must curb the flaming powers of emotion with an iron grip. In the realization and application of those principles lies the key of the fellow craft. In the burning of the chaos, we must be forged in fire. And in being forged in fire, we shall be able to take on anything that is thrown at us. You also then must learn to control your emotions, the mastery over emotions, the second ruffian. Are we understanding? 3 ruffians, 3 degrees, 3 ways of being that we must put onto our mastery and gain mastery over. In this degree, the 2 points of the compass, one higher than the other, symbolize the heart and mind. And with the expression of the higher emotions, the heart points of the compass is liberated from the square, which is an instrument used to measure the block of matter and therefore symbolizes form. A large percentage of people of the world at the present time are passing through spiritually the degree of the fellow craft. With its 5 senses, the sense perception come under the control of the emotional energies. Therefore, the development of the senses is necessary to the constructive expression of the fellow craft power. Man must realize that all the powers which he has many years of need have earned for him to have come in order that through them he may liberate more fully the prisoner within his own being. As the fellow craft degree is the middle of the 3, the spiritual duty of each member is to reach the point of poise or balance, which is always secured between extremes. The mastery of expression is also to be found in this degree. The keywords of the fellow craft may be briefly defined as compassion, poise, and transmutation. Can you control your emotions when all things seem to be burning around you, right? It seems to be what's going on in our world. The world at all times seems to be always crashing on around us. I don't remember when it ever has not. And so it's such an interesting thing that happens is that a large percentage of the people of the world at the present time are passing through spiritually the degree of the fellow craft. Maybe as a world, that's what we're dealing with. And as we're moving on into higher levels of consciousness, who knows? But compassion, poise, and transmutation, who doesn't want to have more compassion, be a little more poised and transmute themselves a little faster so they can move on, right? From whatever that is. And even me saying to move on is kind of a hard thing to state because I'm not one to say when we need to move on or not. And maybe it's the transmutation I need to sit with a little more. In the fellow craft degree is concealed the dynamo of human life. The fellow craft is the worker with elemental fire, which it is in his duty to transmute into spiritual light. The heart is the center of his activity, and it is while in this degree that the human side of the nature, with its constructive emotions, should be brought out and emphasized. But all of these expressions of the human heart must become transmuted into the emotionless compassion of the gods, who, despite the suffering of the moment, gaze down upon mankind and see that it is good. When the candidate feels that he has reached a point where he is able to manifest every energizing current and fire flame in a constructive, balanced manner, and has spiritually lifted the heart sentiments of the mystic out of the cube of matter, he may then expect that the degree of Master Mason is not far off, and so may look forward eagerly to the time of his spiritual ordination into the higher degree. He should now study himself and realize that he cannot receive promotion into the spiritual lodge until his heart is attuned to a superior spiritual influx from the causal planes of consciousness. The following requirements are necessary before the student can spiritually say that he is a member of the ancient and accepted rite of the fellow craft. The mastery of emotional outbreaks of all kinds, poise under trying conditions, kindness in the face of unkindness, and simplicity with its accompanying power. These points show that the seeker is worthy of being taught by a fellow craftsman. The mastery of the animal energies, the curbing of passion and desire, and the control of the lower nature mark the faithful attempts on the part of the student to be worthy of the fellow craft. The understanding and mastery of the creative forces, the consecration of them to the unfolding of the spiritual nature, and a proper understanding of their physical application are necessary steps at this stage of the student's growth. The transmutation of personal affection into the impersonal compassion shows that the fellow craftsman truly understands his duties and is living in a manner worthy of his order. Personalities cannot bind the true second degree member. For having raised one point of the compass, he now realizes that all personal manifestations are governed by impersonal principles. At this point, the candidate consecrates the five senses to the study of human problems, with the unfolding of sense centers as the motive. For he realizes that the five senses are keys, the proper application of which will give him material spiritual transmutation if he will apply to them the common divers of analogy. The entered apprentice may be termed a materialistic degree. The fellow craft is religious and mystical, while the master mason is occult or philosophical. Each of these is a degree in the unfoldment of a connected life and intelligence, revealing in ever fuller expression the gradual liberation of the master from the triangular cell of threefold negation, which marks the early stage of the individualization. So ends chapter 4. I think that I don't know what more to say than that because he sums it up so nicely. Manly P. Hall basically says all the things that, like, there are certain things that we must go through in each craft, in each grade. And those things that we go through are the development so we can even be on the path, right? How can we control our emotions, have poise and compassion if we don't understand how the world works, both inner and outer? So first I start mastering my body and mastering my mind and putting in it the correct tools and techniques to be able to take on the path of action. That then once I walk on the fellow craft, the second degree, I then am on the experiential path, and that's the path of chaos. The world itself is chaos. And as the individual on the journey, it is my point, right, that the main character in this journey, which is you and you and you and you and everyone who's listening and me, is that, but it's not a solipsistic. It's not solipsism, right? What that means is I'm not the only one on the journey. I'm not the only dreamer dreaming the dream. We are all dreamers dreaming the great dream. And in doing so, I must understand that. And that's why compassion is even necessary, or a moral structure, or an ethical system. Why would I even want to make my body a living temple into that of God if we all weren't here trying to do all the same things as well? And so as I do that, I walk chaos, because what's the big thing that everyone says? Order from chaos, right? And that's how everyone's like, oh, they're putting order back from chaos. They must be Masons. They must be satanic. It's kind of ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous because who's not wanting to order their life from chaos, right? I think everybody. And if you're not wanting that, you're kidding yourself. And so we must move on from there, right? Next time on episode 4, we will move on into the Master Mason degree and try to truly understand what that means for us. And he's going to place and put out a pretty seamless vision of what that looks like and why. How does this relate to media? This relates to media is that I think everybody and everything we're watching is on this path if they are to be heroes in the journey. Not all stories are the hero's journey. Most of them are, even if it's a drama or an action or like silly stories that most stories have somebody trying to conquer something to be better or worse, or to gain something, and sometimes it's truly his analogy, right? He's saying we must truly understand analogy of what it means to be the perfect stone. And the more we read and the more we understand, the more we try to gain, as Wild Sea says, self-mastery. And to go back to what Kaiba says, tools for the fool. And all these are tools for a fool, as in we are all fools on the journey. And these are tools that we need to be able to try to embetter ourselves so we can make a planet again, make not only a universe, a planet, or a being, my body, but that then we can try to do that for everybody, right? Because there's no point if only I do this. It's that I need everybody else out there to do this as well. I think that's almost obvious, and if you don't, that's fine. There's no reason for you not to, and to not even feel bad about that. But you will have to do it eventually, at least in the way I believe the world works, is that we all are on this path trying to take the adept ship. We're all trying to become adepts on the path. We're all trying to be mystic Masons, no matter who you are. And so I think that is a good place to end. Just know that when you are watching your shows at night or walking the dog or making food, realize that you are Link in Zelda. You are the hero of time. And that all those things are helping you on your journey as you move on in life. And so I am here with you doing that. And so you know that you're never truly alone. And so next week on Magus in the Media, we will move on to chapter 4. Nope, we did chapter 4. We will move on to chapter 5 of The Lost Keys of Freemasonry. And I hope to see you then. Have a wonderful evening.